Hey guys, well the people have spoken. You all want more Q&As. It's funny, these things have really dropped off of the channel over the past year and a half, and I'll tell you what the reason is for that. It's because of the streams, right? And I've just got to get over this fact, but basically, now that I stream on Saturdays, Sundays, and Mondays. During those days, it's essentially just a 2-hour long-ass Q&A with people who show up, and it kind of gives me my fill of Q&A action. But the result has been that my motivation or whatever, it's just ended up coming up less and less on the channel, and I've got to be a bit more professional and realize the fact that, you know, in terms of my total subscriber count, which is a bit stupid to compare to, but in terms of my total subscriber count, only about 1% of you actually manage making it to the streams, so they deserve to be on the channel, and you guys have spoken up about that recently. Let's get back to doing Q&As, and so that's what we're going to be doing here today. I also kind of noticed earlier in the week, I've taken a bit of a dip on Patreon. I've really got to start doing my best never to take that website for granted. It totally changed my life, and I need to remember that one of the big things we were going to do on Patreon are super Q&As, so I'm sorry that we haven't done one of those in a while either. I figure, hey, let's kill two birds with one stone, or start killing two birds. Well, that's kind of weird. We're the Super Q&A, so this is for people who do go over to Patreon, essentially allow me to live my life the way I do and produce this content for you guys and continue focusing on the projects that I do. And essentially the people who I am the absolute most grateful for. Like I say, it did take a bit of a dip this month, so if you guys are at all interested, there is a link down in the description. And well, for those of you who are over there, ages back, I did actually open up rounds of questions so that you could ask me anything you like in the whole world, and you would be almost guaranteed an answer, and a lengthy one at that. This is the Super Q&A. This is the first half of questions that I took from there. There will be another one of these like next week at some point where I answer the other half, so don't panic if yours isn't here already. Don't worry, I will absolutely get to it. So let's just jump straight on in, no particular order here. The first question comes from the antagonist. Hit Alt-Tab, get in game, go do whatever you want, and listen to this like a podcast, like I know you all do. Unless maybe you want to watch lots of Super Adventure Books in the background. Here we go. So the antagonist has a question about living worlds, slightly outdated, but it's still relevant, okay? So they say this: do you believe that Marjorie could be swayed by Lazarus into joining him and his White Mantle, perhaps as a new Inquisitor or even a confessor to combat the imposter Caudicus? Perhaps she'll agree with Lazarus's ambitions once he reveals it to her. I feel like her so-called hatred for the dragons and revenge for her sister might give her the excuse to seek more drastic solutions to Tyrion's dragon problem. So, spoilers for the head of the snake for those who haven't played that yet. Obviously, she's not going to be fighting Caudicus as that happened last patch. We fought Caudicus and now he's dead. But there is still ample opportunity, yeah, right, for Marjorie to end up being swayed by Lazarus. I think that is still something we may absolutely see. In fact, I'll do you one better, and I'm pretty sure that Lazarus will be in the next patch. And if Lazarus is in the next patch, I think it's very likely that Marjorie will be too. It could be interesting to see Marjorie kind of take his side, because that would drum up some juicy drama between her and Casimir, the mysteriously missing in action Casimir. And I very much enjoyed from this season the idea that all the characters are really coming into their own and acting like real people rather than cardboard cutouts that have just been shoved onto a journey together. Like, the new guild, Dragon's Watch, isn't working out very well at all, and I love that, because it kind of feels like back in season 1, it would have been working out very well. Everyone would have just shoehorned in together and run along on their merry ways. So yeah, maybe Marjorie does end up caring about what Lazarus has to say. So what could that be? Well, you say Lazarus will reveal his plans. He kind of did already reveal his plans. He says his plans is to fight against the Elder Dragons. I suppose if you consider him a liar still, that's when his true ambition may still be something to be unveiled, and Marjorie might actually get at this. But I don't know about that. Maybe he does just care about killing the Elder Dragons, and if that is true, Marjorie's got just as much cause as anyone else to be angry at the Elder Dragons and want to fight back against the Elder Dragons. Particularly, it's a part of her character that's been very forward-facing to us as the audience, right? Like, tons of NPCs and characters in the world have been impacted by the Elder Dragons, but we haven't seen it as the players, as well as perhaps we have seen Marjorie be affected by it through the Belinda storyline. And of course, in the personal story, there was a lot of loss loss caused by Zaitan, and in the story journal stuff with Heart of Thorns, we saw a lot of loss caused too. Particularly, we see how Bram is dealing with that in a very similar way, rallying the Norn. And so, yeah, I think that maybe Marjorie will end up teaming up with Lazarus. Will it be to her detriment is the bigger question. But again, I think this could be next patch, and I'm very excited about that. In fact, we haven't really done much talk on the channel just yet about all the potential places we could go in next patch, and maybe that's something I should start getting on soon, because, hey, in about a month or so, max, probably, we'll be playing another map and another juicy chunk of story. Should be good. Next question comes from Disturbed Angel, who has kind of a personal question here. A lot of people asking about Guild Wars in this section of the Super Q&A. The Super Q&A, you can ask me anything. Usually people take ample opportunity to exercise that, but I think for today, Disturbed Angel is one of the only ones who says, what is one international location, a tourist spot, a hidden location, or such that you want to visit? I would love to, there's a lot of places I'd love to visit. For people that don't know this about me, for a long time, my priority ambition in this whole world, shortly before I started my YouTube channel and started doing, getting distracted by other things, was to travel the world and was to visit a lot of different historical and interesting sites. I come from a family where a holiday to us is pretty much just going to a hotel and lounging by a pool or a beach for, 10 days to 2 weeks, and that's it. And it's always infuriated me. I've always wanted to travel. I've always wanted to visit different places, and I've got a few under my belt, but not that many. To this day, probably the first thing as I read this comment here is I'd love to visit Angkor Wat. I've had a bit of a thing for Angkor Wat for a while now, thanks to a very old guildie of mine. And also, since I was a very young kid in particular, I'd love to go to Egypt for all the classic touristy things. Problem is, as a holiday destination, as I've grown older, I've seen, the real Egypt, the contemporary Egypt, and what it's like to be a tourist there, and it seems like kind of naff, to be honest, so that's unfortunate. Though I did read something on Reddit about a particular place you can go where there's basically no tourists a while back, and I kind of added that to my list. I've actually got, like, a really big book filled with different locations that I'm really interested in, and I've basically circled off that I'd love to visit one day. And another thing I'd love to do, too, is visit historical sites of ancient mankind dotted around the world and kind of follow humanity's progression through the world, like sort of in reverse. So you go to like some of the earliest archaeological sites where we found remains of humans, and then you sort of push forward, and eventually this takes you through multiple different civilizations and areas of the world as you sort of fan out. I'd love to do that too, but these are also pie in the sky, and unfortunately revolve around having a lifestyle where you have a lot of time and a lot of money, neither of which I really have. But one day maybe. Next question is from Delcia. Or Delcy, I guess. They're talking a little bit about decorations. People might not be interested in decorations, but I am interested in decorations. I think decorations are awesome, and I've got a lot to talk to you guys about them when I finally get my Heart of Thorns review out. But so, the question here is this. I love the idea of prestige guild hall decorations, but I worry that we're at the point where players bristle at the idea of any decoration being expensive or difficult to obtain. It's hard to shake the first impression of everything having been unreachable, even though most decorations have been affordable for more than 6 months now. They say this: if you could design or the cost or recipe only for a new prestige guild hall decoration, what would you choose? For this hypothetical, the decoration's appearance hasn't been finalized, but we can all assume and say it's safe to say that it's impressive. I love this question, and I love what you talk about with decorations here as well, because I've got to be honest, I agree with you entirely. I think the community isn't a place where we bristle at the idea of a prestige decoration, and I think that is rooted in what the system was like at the release of Heart of Thorns, and I do think not enough people have gone back and updated their impressions about Guild Hall decorations, or started looking at genuine, real scribing costs in contemporary Guild Wars 2, rather than what it was like at the start of Heart of Thorns. Because yeah, I do think things are a lot more accessible than they once upon a time were. You say 6 months ago now, I'd actually rewind the clock right back to the start of Heart of Thorns, where for so many different reasons, decorations were really, really, really difficult to get. And I do think also that prestige decorations, there's something cool about that. There's something cool about a prestige version of a reward, no matter what reward structure we're dealing with, right? Not everything has to be entirely easy. In particular, There is one decoration that still exists in the game to this day. It's a pathetic small little flower, right? It's a plant that, in terms of looking impressive, will only be impressive if you have a real eye for detail. But it's a tiny little plant that is insanely expensive. And that's because it's a prestige decoration. But people kind of bristle at the idea of this thing existing. It's one of the only places that it truly seriously exists with decorations at the moment. Anyway, I could spend hours ranting about decorations. If I was going to make a new prestige decoration, what would it be? It's funny, I think my immediate answer, the first thing I thought when I read this question, is actually already a thing, and it's what they did with the Whispers globes. Of course, I'd do it slightly differently, but essentially for those who are out of the loop, you can spend gifts of exploration on decorations, and I think that's a fantastic idea of something to do for a prestige decoration. I really, really, really do. The issues with it from launch are, in a slightly different realm where the Globe of Whispers didn't exist at all back then. But I like ideas like this. So here's another one for you that the devs haven't done, and it's something that we discussed kind of recently as a community. It's related to the personal story. So you guys know I really don't like the personal story, but I also don't like that people don't play it, even though they have good reason to not play it, right? But at the end of the personal story, you actually get a token for a specific weapon set. Well, what if those tokens could be exchanged for weapons or collected in bulk to eventually then give you like this epic decoration in your guild hall that was somehow, reminiscent of whatever the personal story was about. Some kind of trophy maybe or something that you complete the personal story to do. So you get people farming and speed running and trying to find their quickest way through. I think that'd be interesting. I think that'd be very interesting. So maybe that would be another fun way of implementing a prestige decoration that also taps into what Guild Wars 2 needs, right? Which is dedicated rewards from dedicated areas. Your dedicated reward is this decoration, which comes from doing personal story. I kind of like that. Moving on. Though I must say with that previous question, I know 100% not everybody is going to be into that, for sure. Moving on, we got Ruben van Limbergen, who says, Dear WP, do you feel that ArenaNet's new way to deliver the Living World content, which would be a new episode every 2 or 3 months, has actually hurt you in any way as a content creator on YouTube? They say, I can see how less frequent updates to the game can result in less videos on the game, since most videos you produce are related to the story, speculation and news. Of course, there are odd videos on third-party programs, ICM, Reshade, and recently launched Buddy, but these don't really show up that regularly on the channel. This is a really cool question. As for that last part, yes, you can supplement stuff. I don't feel like my channel should entirely be dependent on the developers putting stuff in the game. Now, largely it is in a big way, and people tend to not enjoy watching videos that are outside of that scope. So like the guild hall decorations and stuff like that, we have to struggle to get the viewership on. Most people like it. I only really like watching when a lot of stuff's happening with the game. That's true. I can't get around that. But there are a lot of third-party things that I could just straight up do videos on that I don't in the end. In fact, there are more than a few people that I've disappointed over the years who've said, hey WP, I made this cool thing. I believe there was actually, but the one that really stings me at the moment is there was somebody made like a mini game. I believe it was the Breachmaker game that actually has a Wooden Potatoes Easter egg in it. That I don't know what that Easter egg is or anything. I refrained from looking at because the creator said, WP, please make a video on this. This would be so cool. And I said, yeah, I will. I will have a look. And I still haven't to this day. There's a lot of people that I've disappointed with that kind of stuff, and I could do more. But to your other part of the question, does the Living World Season 3 format actually hurt me? So let's do some background here. I was a content creator before the game came out, where it was just speculation and it was just teaching people about the franchise who were just getting involved with it and just picking apart what the devs said. I was a content creator in what I would consider a drought, okay, seriously, after release. I was a creator through release when I could have talked about any number of things, but didn't. I was a creator through Season 1, Season 2, Heart of Thorns Roll-In, Heart of Thorns, and Season 3. So I've got all of this perspective to look back on. And I honestly think that the Season 3 format is pretty damn good. People look very rosy-eyed and nostalgic back at Season 1. Season 1, there was not as much to talk about as you'd think, especially early in Season 1. And the space between those updates also were a lot bigger than you might be remembering. One of the most frustrating things for me to see in the community these days is people talk about Season 1 in ways that it does not deserve to be talked about. Season 1 was not as good as people are now starting to think. It's funny because honestly, if we fast forward the clock, right? If ArenaNet tomorrow announced that Season 3 format was ending, and we'd get something else. And then we fast forward the clock 3 years, you'd have a ton of people, you know, talking about this as being the golden age of Guild Wars 2. You seriously would, and I know some people might scoff at hearing that. It's because the more time that passes, the easier it is to forget the little things that were annoying you. And Season 1 was rife with them. Season 2 as well, right? Like, Season 2 was okay, and it's particularly if you were someone that liked to do, like, Let's Play stuff for Guild Wars 2, there was probably a reason to talk about. But Season 2, some of those updates were tiny, guys. They were a lot smaller than they look nowadays. There was a lot of replayability built into them, which is where their strength is. But, you know, some of those story steps you'd get in Season 2 were really short. And then there was like a big gap in the middle of Season 2. Season 2 wasn't really a shining example of anything either. I think that they've most consistently provided stuff for content creators to talk about right now with this format, because there has been like such a gamut of different things to go on. Like, even when we consider the Guild Wars 2 content drought, you know, this supposed content drought, that really, especially for a content creator, that really wasn't a content drought. There were patches, there were PvP seasons going on, there were 3 fully fledged raid releases going on during that time. And a lot of people may not have engaged in that stuff, but that doesn't mean I didn't have stuff to talk about. That content drought wasn't as much of a drought as we now look back on it as, and I really do stand by that. So yeah, I think this format's good. I think the one big slip they've done with this format so far is this most recent release, the Head of the Snake. I think they made a bit of a mistake there, because they did a double release, right? And quite often you'll hear me as a person saying, oh yeah, they should just bundle everything together and put it out in one big splash, and that will be awesome. I do say that a lot, but I think in retrospect, for the Head of the Snake, giving us the raid and the living world thing together didn't work out for me. Like, I worked really hard when they did that double release to try and clear the entire raid wing, get worthwhile guides and content about all of the mechanics of all the encounters and all of the lore from all of the encounters and the post-exploration. I did all of that from the raid at the same time as I was trying to do all the stuff about the new map and about the new story that was actually dropping in, as well as all the, you know, the feature changes that happened, and, you know, all the other various little patches and balance and PvP side stuff that went on. Like, there was just such a vast amount of stuff to do, and in the end, like, as hard as it was to make a lot of the raiding stuff and some of the other things, they really didn't get as much viewership as they should have. And now we're sitting here several weeks later thinking, well, come on, we want to talk about stuff. Right now is the perfect time for the Bastion of the Penitent to come out. It would have given everyone, the players, the content creators, the developers, everyone the space they needed to kind of spread things out properly. I think that would have been way better if they'd actually released those separately. I just would have. I know that, you know, a lot of raiders were desperate for raiding content early, and people don't like the idea of just holding stuff back for what seem like arbitrary reasons. But to me, that's not an arbitrary reason. I think that that was a bit of a mistake. I kind of don't want to see too many more double releases like that right now. It was just so much work, and then you lose the amount of reward you see from that work, I guess, the more crowded out it is. But yeah, I like the format. Sorry, I could ramble about this a long time. I like the format, and I think they're doing very well. Mostly it's up to me to make sure there's other little videos and things going on around that, like, I don't know, Q&As. Moving on, Michael Tone says, this is a pretty interesting question. He says, do you prepare answers for these questions before recording, or are they just off the fly? All right, so listen, here's what, for super Q&As, here's what I do, right? Because I know I'm going to talk a long time about each one, and I know there's going to be a lot. I literally go to Patreon. I look at the post that I've submitted for everybody to send questions in, and I scroll down through all the questions, screenshotting all of them to implement into the footage. And as I do, I read them, and I make sure when I read them that first time that I don't really think about my answer too much, but as long as I know I've got some vague response I can give, as long as there's a really crappy poo little response somewhere in there, I'll roll with it. If it's like a really offensive, and I've never had this, but if it was like a really offensive comment, or if it was like something I really have no idea what I'd say about, I just wouldn't put it into the video. But that's, to this day, I don't think that's actually happened. But yeah, like a very vague proof check. As long as I know I've got a tiny little thing, then that's it. Then I start recording, and well, the rest is off the cuff, basically. For the other Q&As, I'll be more discriminate about what I pick, because I get, you know, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of questions, and I particularly don't like picking questions that I've already answered recently. Like, I try and imagine, you know, Joe Blogs, right? A random guy watching Wooden Potatoes on YouTube. If he watches a Q&A in April and I answer a question, I don't want Joe Blogs to hear the same question and the same answer come up again in May, and then again in June, and again in July. That would suck. And I'm always really wary of that, so I do that like extra pass on my regular Q&As. But that's it, really. Maybe not very interesting, but that's what I do. I don't like fully script out the questions, the answers or anything. I think that much is pretty much apparent. Next, we've got a question from Inks. MMO Inks. He's got a fantastic YouTube channel, by the way, guys. One of those few of us who do consistent YouTube stuff, so I would check him out if you can. He says, with 2 of the lowest earning quarters in Guild Wars 2 recently, what do you think ArenaNet need to do in order to bring players back into the game? Is this simply lack of marketing when it comes to the Living World Season 3, or is it a larger problem now with players expecting or waiting for another expansion to release? There's a lot of different things to talk about here. First, the marketability of Season 3. I think it's really, really difficult to talk about. It's really interesting because I'm genuinely not sure whether it has any marketability to regular gamers. Maybe it's going to be vaguely interesting to people in the MMO market. Now, MMOs as a genre right now, I would describe, and maybe incorrectly, but I would describe as a genre that many people feel is stagnant and have for years. Feel is stagnant, feel that they want a great MMO experience, but they don't have anywhere to experience that. And so, and I feel like there's a lot of people like that who are into MMOs. And maybe these people can be reached by Season 3 marketing. Maybe they'll be like, yeah, Guild Wars 2 does look like it has a lot of stuff going on. And maybe they would cross over. But outside of those people, like jaded MMO players that never gave Guild Wars 2 a shot ever, outside of those and old Guild Wars 2 players who are maybe tempted to return, I don't think you can really market Season 3 to anyone. I think Season 3 is more of a mechanism to keep a population in the game while they work on the next expansion. And it's the expansion that you market, and it's the expansion that breaches other areas of the world of gaming and brings in totally new people. So, like, we saw them, they tried very hard. Back in the Season 1 days, they tried really hard to market all of their episodes. But you saw that drop off, like, pretty big, I think. And I don't know whether they really care to do it that much anymore. So that's what I'd say about the marketing. Is it a lack of marketing? Maybe not. Maybe they don't have to market this too much at all. Maybe that will never get them much of anywhere. But then there's another question. So, yes, Guild Wars 2 had, like, 2 very low earnings reports from its gem store, right? Or just across the game, I guess, right? Lack of box sales, and lack of microtransaction purchases. We know, though, that microtransactions are the big pull. They are the main money maker. They are the big weight, right? Especially when we're not in, like, hype leading up to another box sale of something. So I really think this idea that just because it had low earnings, and I'm not being an apologist here, I'm really not, but I don't think we can say because it had low earnings, it also means that, like, the community is dissolving, or that the game itself is in a bad place. I genuinely stand by the notion that Guild Wars 2 is in one of the best places it's ever been right now, and probably has, compared to various other areas of Guild Wars 2's history, a really solid core of players playing it. But does that mean that it's earning a lot of money? Not necessarily, right? Like, I think that the reason it's having low quarterly earnings, bluntly, is not that it's having bad updates, is not that its community is shrinking. I think the reason that it has low quarterly updates is because ArenaNet don't monetize their game very well, like, at all. You look at most things on the gem store and they are just not that interesting to buy. I could do an entire dedicated video on this topic, but I think that that's the problem. I think it's the way that they monetize things. So some people were a little bit frustrated with the Elemental Sword that came out recently, which was, like, account bound pure RNG from Black Lion chests, and they're like, oh, this is a trashy bad thing for the devs to have done. I'm actually really sympathetic to stuff like that, because I'm like, yeah, go out, earn some money. People know it's RNG. They know they're spending money on it. Let capitalism work. Let people spend their money on a risk if that's what they want to do. And I feel like the game, in light of the fact that they had 2 really low earnings amounts, let them try new things and play around with the gem store to actually earn some money, right? Like, I actually think that's totally okay. And that's kind of my opinion. I just think it's more within the gem store than it is other areas of the game. And it sucks, right? Because I do think the devs have done really good work, and it's like, oh, now they're not seeing any money come from their good work. Well, fine, start trying new things with the gem store. Go for it. I have absolutely no sympathy for people who are raging about stuff like that. Obviously, there's a point where it gets too tacky and too bad, but I don't feel like the devs have crossed that line. And, you know, if they want to keep playing around, if they want to keep improving Black Lion chests, then, yeah, put the focus there. Do it, because if there's no money, guys, there's no continued development for amazing stuff like we've been getting recently. There's just not. I feel like my entire answer there is going to provoke a bit of a response. Well, please feel free to leave it. I'd be curious to see what you guys think about the gem store stuff in the comments down below. Maybe this will be one of the big things we can end up diving into discussion on. Moving on, Enemus says, as a person who's trying out Guild Wars 1, this is an interesting question. Trying out Guild Wars 1 for lore purposes, what class and secondary class do you say is the best for soloing through the story? I'm currently trying out Ellie Necro, but I'm also interested in Ranger thoughts. Any advice? This is a weird, you're doing a lot of stuff here. This is a weird question. And the funny thing is, right, what was my original Let's Play of Guild Wars 1? The first Guild Wars content I ever made. It was a solo playthrough that focused on the story. Okay, so first we have to discuss, what do you mean solo for Guild Wars 1? If you mean playing without friends or guildies or, you know, like humans, if you mean that, first, I would warn you, it's an old game, and that experience probably isn't going to be that gratifying, okay? But you're basically saying you're going to play with henchmen and heroes and stuff like that. What would be the best class for that? Well, I think that when you really hit, like, the point where you're vanquishing stuff, and maybe this doesn't matter because you only care about story, I think Assassin is, like, the best. Like, Death Blossom spam and Save Yourself spam at the same time is, like, insane extra damage. Assassin could just do a lot of different things. So maybe you've got that to consider. But pretty much any class combo will work because at some point you're only going to represent an eighth of your entire team, and it lets you get away with a lot of just fundamentally crappy or random or weird builds. It's just whatever you want to do. I would also say like melee builds are pretty fun because especially if you're using heroes, you can design your entire hero support setup about buffing your individual damage. And what this means is when you attack things, you feel the weight of your own punches more, and the game gives you more feedback on what your character's doing, which is a serious problem in Guild Wars 1. For people that don't understand, I use this comparison all the time. Guild Wars 1, for every single fight, feels like a Guild Wars 2 world boss, in that you're doing your rotations and your damage and stuff, but how much you're contributing to that health bar going down, you can never really tell that well. And that's one of the big problems with Guild Wars 1's PvE combat. You cannot get around that. But as a melee character, you can kind of screw and monkey with your team build to alter that a little bit. So rewinding just for a second, this idea of soloing, if you are trying to solo, as in do it without a party, and you're just trying out Guild, stop it. Stop right now. You can't do it. Don't do it. You can't do it. Skill balance, you're probably not going to be able to do it at all. If you want to solo everywhere, you're going to need all the classes, all at max, with tons of different farm builds and incredible mechanical strength of the game. You are not going to solo that game. Do not let my Prophecy solo playthrough deceive you. It is not going to be possible for you. It is not going to be enjoyable for you. It's going to be a terrible, terrible thing to even consider. If you're just trying out Guild Wars 1, play it as it's meant to be played, i.e. in a party, whether that's with AI or whether that's with actual human beings that you can find to play the game. Do not try to genuinely solo it. It's not going to happen, and especially not on an Ellie Necro. No. I mean, I did Warrior Monk, which is kind of a classic newbie combo, and a combo that everyone used to love in the game, but it's because it was one of the very few things that could actually accomplish such a thing. I was doing a lot of different rules. We don't have to go into all of those. So yeah. All right, so let's rewind. Let's talk about lore purposes then. So let's just say, all right, you're playing Guild Wars 1. You want to get the most out of the lore. What are you doing? Well, Guild Wars 1 did do better with class lore than it did with Guild Wars 2. I think that Necro and Monk for Prophecies are probably some of the more interesting ones, just because of like their interesting quests and their duality that they set up in pre-searing. I think Ranger in both games, by the way, is really quite cool because you get that added thing to look at while you explore the world, which is, hey, what kind of pet do I want? And you get to play around with that stuff too. So Ranger's pretty cool. But in terms of like the best lore quests that ever were dropped into the game, purely within the lens of classes, which is a really specific thing we're looking at now. If you start in factions, you should, again, play an assassin. Assassin has really cool quests, like the starter quest for an assassin in terms of the story. You, like, assassinate a really important Tengu character, and then you get to see the fallout of it. It's brilliant. So the assassin stuff is probably the height in terms of class stuff, but how much you should focus on what I said there is probably not that much, because to be real, that's tiny little itsy bits of the entire story. Don't worry too much about your class, your secondary class. Mostly think about your primary. Your secondary you'll be able to change eventually. Think about your primary more than anything else, and just do something you found fun. I almost started this entire franchise as a monk, but then I went with Mesmer/monk, and I played my Mesmer as a monk for a really long time, until then I swapped and started getting into the Mesmery things. So just have fun with it, really. It's not a big deal. All right, moving on. Next question we got from... Oh, and the last question of today as well. I mean, we've almost been getting half an hour, so we'll leave it here, and the next selection will come at some point next week, guys. Destiny's Charm says, hey, WP, can you add the source or the name of... This is a very fitting thing to end, by the way, on. Can you add the source or name of music you use in the description? I know it's not all Guild Wars stuff, but some of it's so beautiful, and I don't know where else to find it. If you think you'd have some copyright issues, then no biggie, thanks. All right, listen. For background music, I will never have copyright issues because it's background music and systems cannot detect that it's there anyway, but I'm talking over it. Like, no one would, like, say I'm using Zelda music in the background of this video. No one's ever going to be like, oh, I want to listen to the Zelda OST. Oh, I won't buy it. I'll just put on a Wood and Potatoes video. That's never going to happen, right? Because I'm talking over it about random stuff about a totally different game. So it's not a copyright thing. The reason why I don't credit individual music in videos like this, where it's variety gaming music, is because I'm a lazy bastard that never actually compiled this music myself. I simply find compilations online, download those that other people have made, download those and wholesale drop them in. So at any one moment, I don't know what song's playing in the background right now as you hear me right now. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's some Halo stuff. I don't know. I literally have no idea. I just make sure I enjoy the compilation and that there's nothing weird in the compilation. And then once it's got that very broad Wood and Potato stamp of approval on it, it goes into my video. So I cannot credit the individual ones. All I can do is credit the compilation itself, and it's nearly the same one every time, and that's in the description down below. If you like the music in videos like this, don't thank me. Thank the dude who made this original video, and I don't know, the composers who made the music too. That would be a nice thing, I guess, if you can. So there you go. That's the story of the music in my video. Something I've told many times before, but there you go. So that's the super Q&A, guys. Regular Q&As will be coming. As I said, I wanna please you guys. I wanna impress. I wanna put that stuff out, even though we do the live streams, and I might be doubling up on what I say across both. Also, if you want to get in on the next Super Q&A, and if you are interested in joining on Patreon, that would mean the world to me. Like I said, I really don't want to take anyone who goes there for granted. I do my best to try and give you guys good perks. You get audio versions of the videos when I am on top of putting them online. You sometimes get early access to higher quality, advertisement-free full videos. If you go the whole hog on Patreon, you get access to this stuff. I try and do my best over there. You guys allow me to live my life the way I have been, and it means the world to me. So there'll also be a description to Patreon. It takes like just a couple of seconds to sign up if you're interested. But thank you guys. I hope you enjoyed. I'll be back tomorrow for more awesome stuff. Have a great evening. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks for the lovely outcry of support from yesterday too. And I guess I will see you shortly. Have a good evening, everyone, and take care.